Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for attending this session today. And as Brett kind of mentioned, I'll make sure I've got a brief presentation here to walk you through energy efficiency programs. My intention is to leave plenty of time at the end to answer all of your questions that you might have about energy efficiency programs, what SaskPower is doing, or any kind of plans for the future. So without further ado, you're obviously here to hear me talk about energy efficiency programs and, as I like to call them internally and, across the industry, demand side management programs. And so what I'm going to talk a bit about is how these kinds of programs can contribute to SaskPower's future supply plans, how they can help customers manage concerns around affordability, energy affordability, and increasing costs. And then I'm going to obviously talk about what SaskPower is doing and planning for in the customer energy efficiency program space and the kinds of things that we're working on and the kinds of things you should all be looking forward to in the coming months and years. So let's start with, why we like energy efficiency programs, right? And I think because there's a win-win-win opportunity here. There's good value. Obviously, customers save money because if customers are kind of using only what they need or using less energy, that means you're paying less. So that's good for everybody's bottom line because you're saving money. But energy efficiency programs also can reduce emissions. Again, connecting the dots. If we use less electricity, that means fewer kilowatt hours need to be generated, and that means fewer emissions. So that's another good thing. The last piece is it also saves SaskPower money. So if you think about less demand for electricity from customers means SaskPower has to supply less electricity, which means we've got to spend less on supplying, buying electricity, generating electricity, what have you. When you think about it, the cheapest electricity is the electricity that you don't even have to generate or purchase in the first place. And so energy efficiency programs check a lot of boxes for SaskPower and obviously our customers. I think that's why we're excited about what we've got here, and we're excited about what we're working towards. I should also add, that note about the cheapest electricity is the one that you don't have to generate. That goes for your own individual businesses, your own individual residences as well. If you're thinking about something like rooftop solar or self-generation, I'd encourage you to say, think about what you can do on an efficiency standpoint first. Get your total, energy consumption as low as possible before you're entertaining, now I want to think about generating my own electricity or my own power. It's advice we give to our customers as well. There's the most bang for your buck in energy efficiency compared to, self-generation or other things like that. In order to really understand how energy efficiency programs provide value to the utility and of course to customers, you got to understand a little bit about peak demand. So what I've got on the screen up here is it's a peak demand curve, gives a winter day in Saskatchewan, if you will. And you don't have to pay much attention to exactly what's going on here. Other than that, customers in Saskatchewan use more and less electricity at different times of the day. And what we know in Saskatchewan is that, there's a period from, you can see the hours there, hour ending 17, with 5 o'clock until 9 o'clock. That's when the most people and the most businesses in Saskatchewan in the winter are using power. And so SaskPower has to build its electricity system to meet that few hours that may only take place, a handful of days, a dozen days every winter. And, it's only for a few hours, but we've got to have the supply in place to be able to satisfy customers' energy demand. And so again, it costs less to reduce load than it does to build new load. And so the idea behind energy efficiency programs and demand side management is that if we can, instead of generating that extra 50, 100, 150 megawatts of electricity, if we can find some way to encourage customers to reduce that amount of electricity, it basically achieves the same outcome. And in many cases, we can do that. That costs less to reduce the load than it does to generate new supply. So again, I mentioned demand side management. In the industry, that's commonly what we refer to energy efficiency programs. And all that means is that typically a utility manages the demand for electricity that customers have by adjusting the supply. So when there's high demand for electricity, SaskPower generates more supply. When that amount drops, we turn the supply down, and we're trying to match it up in kind of perfect harmony. But what demand side management suggests is On the customer side, we can do a bit of adjustments up and down as well. So when demand for electricity is high, instead of supplying more electricity, maybe there are other customers that might reduce their demand for electricity. That again helps us keep the system, the supply and demand in perfect balance. So DSM includes energy efficiency, which is what we've been talking about, which is a permanent reduction to demand, as well as we're also talking about things like behavioral or demand response options that would, temporarily reduce demand during peak periods, or we'd shift those loads to off-peak periods. So if you take a look at the bottom left quadrant there, it says conservation or energy efficiency. We're talking about, again, permanent load reductions from replacements with more efficient technologies typically. And so you think, if you replace your appliances or some commercial equipment with more efficient models, those pieces of equipment now use less electricity than the earlier version. So it brings your entire demand for electricity down kind of all the time. That's installed, and that's how customers save money. You're using less electricity because that equipment uses less electricity. That means less demand for electricity on the system. Again, we're all winners. If you look at the top right quadrant, it says peak shaving. We call this peak demand reduction or peak shaving. This basically attempts for us to try and, shave off, as the term is, shave off that peak and try to keep the demand profile as flat as possible and with as few sort of ups and downs as we can, because that's an easier, more consistent set of customer demand to meet. And so you think of an example here, SaskPower, signals a critical peak event, and customers temporarily turn down or off their devices or equipment that's using electricity. And so you think of things, some of the most common ones are like utility smart thermostat programs, or smart, air conditioning units, or, EV chargers, even in the commercial space, commercial lighting, pumps, motors, things like that. And now the way customers benefit is they typically receive some kind of incentive payment or a bill credit or something for participating in that load shedding demand response event. The last one I'm going to talk about here is load shifting. Again, sort of a different side of the same kind of coin. That's when we're talking about shifting loads from on-peak periods to periods with lower demand or off-peak periods. And one of the best examples I've got is, you think about EV drivers, and maybe offering EV drivers some kind of reduced rate or incentive to charge their EVs overnight, instead of the slide I showed before, instead of, from at 6 p.m. when everyone gets home from work and might be charging in their vehicles. You provide an incentive to customers to shift those behaviors to a time when it's easier to supply. And again, it's easier on the system. It costs less to run these programs than it does to build new generation. And so again, I'm talking about the win-win-win here. Oops. Those are the three visuals that I wanted to present. I'm going to go back to this slide here and stop sharing because, I don't have any more slides to share. So bear with me for 1 second here. Okay, now I've got you. Well, I can't see all of you, but it's back in front of me. So now I want to talk a bit about what we're doing on the SaskPower side. You're probably interested in the kinds of things we're working on and what we've got planned for the future here. And so, demand side programs, as I mentioned from the start, can absolutely be a part of SaskPower's future supply plans. But like any options, there's pros and cons, and there's risks and things like that. And so two of the biggest risks around energy efficiency and demand side management options as solutions to supply planning is that it requires customers to change behaviors. And so that's not, it's not impossible, but compared to other sources, it depends on customers kind of taking action and committing to, be part of this supply option and reduce the electricity that they're using. Not impossible, but, it presents some risks to implementing these. The other challenge is the uncertainty of the long-term reliability or sort of sustainability of DSM as a supply option. So when, for example, a utility builds a new wind facility, there's reasonable assurance that for the next 20 or 30 years, that system is going to provide a certain amount of electricity. Now, with demand side management programs, you may start off with 10,000 customers that have reduced 300, 200 or 300 megawatts of electricity demand. But by year 5, if you still only got 1,000 customers still participating, and by year 10, maybe you've only got 500 customers still participating. And that presents challenges because, as you may have heard, planning and building, bigger assets and power generation supply and interconnections and negotiations with other territories, it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of lead time to plan that out. And so the uncertainty around how reliable and how sustainable DSM solutions can be presents another challenge for including them in those broader supply plans. So when we think about what are SaskPower's plans, so SaskPower recognizes its responsibility to support its customers in the face of growing concerns around energy affordability. So we hear that from our customers. We recognize the role that SaskPower can play in supporting that. And so I mentioned a few times, we see these DSM programs, energy efficiency programs, as a win-win solution in that regard. So what we're doing right now is we're developing DSM programs targeting all customer segments. So you're thinking residential, farm, small, medium, commercial, large commercial, industrial customers, specifically targeting a couple of sort of underserved segments like Northern Indigenous communities and lower income customers. We're currently offering a Northern First Nations home retrofit program, as well as an energy assistance program, again, kind of targeting a couple of those sub segments that I mentioned. We've also got an energy advisor training program in market right now. So this is an interesting one. In order to access funding for the federal Greener Homes Grant, which some of you may have heard of, you've got to get an audit from a certified energy manager. And so this energy advisor training program is going to help more people in Saskatchewan get certified to become certified energy managers, so that it's easier for you to get an audit, and it's easier for you to access some of that federal Green Homes funding money for making your home more energy efficient. But that's what we're doing presently. We're also in development and considering prescriptive incentive programs on certain high efficiency products, custom incentive programs for more sophisticated commercial and industrial processes. We're obviously also looking at things like customer education, advice, tools that we can provide to better educate customers so that they can make more energy conscious decisions and, be better informed on what they're doing in their homes or businesses. We're discussing a partner network so that we can have customer education, so we can have a list of trusted experts that we feel comfortable directing customers to. So if you're undertaking a retrofit at your home, or if you need advice on installing some energy efficient equipment, we can point you to industry experts that can help support that. We're also looking at smart technologies. So this is sort of an interesting, technology component where we want to be able to integrate and interact customer smart technologies and devices with a SaskPower smart grid, if you will. The idea is that once those technologies can integrate and connect and interact with each other, there's ability to provide value to customers and also back to SaskPower in the grid, and that we can leverage those technologies to really do some cool things and help customers save money and help more efficiently optimize grid operations. One of the last things I wanted to mention is we're also looking at an off-peak EV charging pilot to better understand the effectiveness of these types of behavioral programs at shifting customers' habits. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things in development, a lot of things that we're working on. Some are closer to launch, some are going to take a little bit more work before they're ready to hit the market. But we're also collaborating with our colleagues over at Sask Energy with the idea to offer customers dual fuel programs that are going to provide options for both natural gas and electricity savings, so that you can kind of tackle your combined energy use. And we're also applying for external funding. So there's lots of funding available from government agencies, federal governments, that we're going to use to be able to either supplement the costs or offer expanded programs to more customers while minimizing SaskPower's own expense in this space. So you may have noticed I'm being a little bit cagey about, what exactly we're planning to launch and when. And that's because I can't sort of, spill the beans on what's being planned and launched until it actually hits the market. So you're gonna have to be patient, but I can say expect a few of these offers to launch later this year, and then again in the coming 12 months and after that. We're putting together a whole kind of package, and we're excited about what we're going to have to offer our customers. I promised that I would be quick. And so with that, I thank you all for listening to me on SaskPower's plans for energy efficiency programs, how they can contribute to our future supply plans. But now I want to return the favor by responding some of the questions that all of you might have about energy efficiency programs.
Great. Thanks so much, Nathan. It sounds like there's a lot going on. I will move right over to some of the questions that have come in. Thank you, everyone, for entering those questions. If any of the rest of you listening have questions, again, we are just, you can pop them into that QA tab on the right-hand side of your screen. I'll start with one of the first ones, Nathan. The question is SaskPower considering implementing time of use billing to encourage customers to use power preferentially during certain times during the day?
It depends what you mean by considering. So I think SaskPower is exploring all kinds of options, which includes, considering things like time of use. But there's certainly, to my knowledge, there's no plan at this point to say, yeah, we're gonna roll out those options. But I mentioned a little bit about electric vehicles. We're talking energy efficiency, so we're not quite in the rooftop solar space. But things like time of use rates, and maybe I would characterize it more just as the way that we bill customers or the way that we charge and incent customers. We're looking at how do we need to set that up to best equip customers to provide value to SaskPower, and SaskPower provide value back to customers.
Great, thank you. One of the other questions here, question and comment, says corporate power rates are much lower than residential power rates, and new power generation plants are being built to meet the needs for corporate power demands. Are DSM programs targeting larger power consumers to encourage them to be more energy efficient?
Absolutely. So I think you're sort of astutely, making an observation here, but we've got a ton of large commercial, large industrial customers that industry in Saskatchewan uses a lot of electricity. So there's a lot of opportunity for energy efficiency there. So absolutely, that's a customer class that we'll roll some things out to better reduce and create energy efficiency in that segment.
Okay. Another comment here by one of our participants is saying Energy Efficiency Canada has an annual scorecard in which they perennially rate Saskatchewan last or near last of all Canadian provinces and cities in the lack of energy efficiency programming is one major reason, citing the lack of energy efficiency program as one major reason. What do you think about this ranking? Is that accurate or justified, was the question?
Well, I'll tell you what, we provide input into that scorecard. So I'm familiar with it. We know the results. What I'll say is much of the scorecard is based on the amount of budget dollars and resources committed to energy efficiency programs. And so I think we're excited about what we're planning to launch and what we're planning to bring forward. I think we're expecting to move the needle on that scorecard.
Okay. So a couple kind of more, technical questions. Could you compare the cost of installing a heat pump over a replacement air conditioner?
A heat pump for a replacement. You know what? I'm not technically savvy enough to get into that for you. But I don't know if we're doing follow-up questions. We can probably get you some information on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'll just share that with everybody. If there are questions that we don't get to or that, we can't answer during this session, you can go over to saskpower.com/engage, and there's an ask a question button on that site, and people are able to, answer questions, and they'll be directed to the people who have, that kind of technical information that can get you an answer pretty quickly. So another one in terms of rooftop solar, does SaskPower have a plan to encourage more customers to invest in rooftop solar with grid tie agreements?
I'll say that's it depends. It's a complicated space, and I think one of the things that we're trying to navigate is how do we I think you mentioned sort of the grid interconnection and the grid agreement. How do we do that in a way that provides value to the customers that are investing in the rooftop solar, but that also provides value to SaskPower? And I think we've gone through iterations. I don't think we're there yet, but I know my team is working on saying, how can we, there's customers that want to do this, and if they want to do it, how can we leverage the most value out of it? So again, customers are winning and SaskPower Power is winning and everybody's enjoying all the benefits of those things. So it's definitely on the table for consideration to say, how do we get the most out of those technologies?
Great. Thanks, Nathan. Another kind of comment question here. It says reducing scope 2 emissions for most consumers depends on SaskPower Power having a net zero grid. And this participant saying we need SaskPower Power to prioritize decarbonizing the grid so that everyone can reduce their impact. Any comment there?
I think that's correct. Yes, you're right. The scope, a lot of those scope 2 emissions, you're getting your electricity from SaskPower Power, so you're sort of, you're hoping for SaskPower Power to decarbonize as efficiently and as quickly as we can. I don't think there's any debate there.
No, and that's really, again, really kind of what today's event is all about, and looking at all the options that SaskPower Power is considering to do that work for sure. Let me just see if there's anything else. It looks like we've answered what we can in the Q&A there, unless anyone else wants to pop one in. We have about 5 minutes left. I can ask you a question, Nathan.
I feel like I see one here that's about, it says it's been answered. Did we talk about batteries?
I don't think we did, actually,
okay.
Unless you didn't.
We're starting to dabble into kind of the self-generation, and I know all these worlds kind of blend together. And like I said in the intro, my team works on energy efficiency, customer generation, electric vehicles, kind of the whole space. But batteries, yes, it's, I don't want to say yes, we're thinking about incenting for behind the meter batteries, but it's another one of those technologies that we're saying there's some value here. How can we figure out a way to create win-win situations for our customers and the grid, so that we can optimize a clean, efficient grid, and also provide opportunities to customers to leverage the investments that they're making in those technologies. So certainly something that's on our radar, and something that we're sort of considering, how do we build that into our programs and services.
Right. One question has since come in here too, or a couple, and I've heard this just as I've been kind of popping into some of the other sessions too. So the question is, as we electrify transportation and heating, SaskPower Power will need a lot more power generation. How is SaskPower Power addressing this?
I can speak on the electric vehicle side. So one of the things that we're doing is we're trying to understand the real impacts of EVs on the Saskatchewan grid. And so, we'd previously been relying on data from other parts of the United States, from BC, where there was more EV drivers and more studies and more information. But in the last year, we partnered with EV drivers in Saskatchewan, and we were working with the University of Regina. We're collecting charging data from actual Saskatchewan EV drivers in our climate, charging on our grid. And that was kind of the first step in sort of establishing a baseline of where customers charge, what the impacts are, and then partnering with our friends at the U of R who modeled some different scenarios. I mentioned the continuation of that program is now to then say, can we influence and shift some of those charging behaviors? So again, we're stepping into that space to try to be as prepared as we can, but it started with, getting some reliable Saskatchewan electric vehicle information so that we've got a good foundation to plan and build off of.
Makes sense. One other question here. It says, what about partnering with other organizations to promote better building codes to optimize energy efficiency?
Yeah, great comment, and something we're supportive of. SaskPower Power isn't the keeper of the building codes, but we're certainly advocates for higher efficiency, higher levels of energy efficiency, because I think, as you all on the session here probably know, it's easier to build highly efficient from the start than it is to try to go back after and retrofit and kind of do a renovation on.
Right. Another question that came in, is SaskPower Power considering building EV power charging stations around the province, or does it want to leave this to private businesses?
So SaskPower Power's actually got that's sort of a both question. We've currently have or launched earlier in 2022 an electric vehicle infrastructure program. So what we were actually doing was providing funding to private businesses, private customers who were interested in installing fast charging around Saskatchewan. So we've talked to EV drivers, we've talked to potential EV drivers, in Saskatchewan and kind of all over North America. And one of the biggest barriers to that EV adoption is the lack of charging infrastructure. I mean, I'm sure you can all appreciate it's pretty tough to contemplate driving an EV if you can't drive to Yorkton, or if you can't drive to Saskatoon or to Prince Albert to visit family or go to your kid's hockey game or whatever it is. And so we kind of outlined the most frequent highway corridors in Saskatchewan that didn't have any fast charging. And then we kind of went and solicited applications for businesses to say, hey, is anyone interested in installing EV charging on these routes? And we're planning to, what we'd identified were 20 projects, 20 locations around Saskatchewan. So in the next, the end of this calendar year, sometime in 2023 or 2024, many of those stations should start to go into service, and we should start to see the build out of a bit of a charging network in Saskatchewan, so that if you're thinking about an EV, we're at least making it a little more palatable to say, okay, I could see myself driving an EV. I can drive to Kindersley and back to Saskatoon, or I can get out to Melville and back to Regina.
Great. Yeah, so kind of just another kind of comment too, just about one of the participants saying, just really noticing a dramatic increase in the costs of power and energy in their household, despite feeling that the usage has actually gone down. And just wondering, can the population here, bear the brunt of increasing costs? And, and is the increasing cost kind of being used to help, force people into being more efficient?
The cost isn't, the cost isn't so that you become more efficient. I think we talked a bit about affordability. And so at SaskPower, we certainly recognize the challenges of not only increasing rates and increasing energy costs, but just increasing costs in general, right? Households and businesses are, things are getting more expensive. And so that's why we've embraced this idea that energy efficiency programs can be a bit of a bridge, or a bit of a mitigation strategy to say, well, if we can help our customers use less electricity, that's gonna reduce their costs a little bit, and hopefully it contributes to managing some of those rising costs that I was looking for a name, anonymous poster, their comment or their question. Totally valid comment. Yeah.
And then I guess that's where you're speaking to, some of those programs are, trying to be customized towards, people in lower socioeconomics as well, right?
Yeah, I'll elaborate on that a bit too. So the biggest beneficiaries of energy efficiency programs are the customers that participate in the program. So if you can get some kind of incentive or bill credit, or you get some efficient equipment installed, you're actually reducing your power bill, you're reducing your consumption, you're reducing your power bill. That's great for the participant. But everybody in the province wins because SaskPower's making lower cost investments. So I mentioned before, it costs less to not have to generate energy in the first place than it does to provide it. So that's good value, and that's good sort of economic decision making for SaskPower, and that helps us spend a little bit less, helps us be more fiscally responsible. And again, that's good for all of our customers, because it helps in whatever way it can to try to mitigate some rate pressures.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Nathan. That was, that's been really informative. And I just, want to thank everyone who joined us as well. Lots of great questions. And we have to wrap up this session because I want to make sure everyone has time to get to the next one. But again, on that left-hand side of your screen, that's where you can access a replay if you want to kind of revisit any of the things that Nathan spoke about. And again, just encouraging people to go to saskpower.com/engage, where there's lots of information too on what's happening in this space. So great. Thank you so much, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.